So our second Module 4 lecture is on social listening and how to do it. We're going to cover collection protocols, AI as your partner, and data quality. You need a systematic collection protocol. Without a protocol, your data is essentially not valid. It can be meaningless. It's impossible to replicate, so how do we know it's true? And you're missing data, and none of that is professional, and none of that is what you want to do. In fact, if you want to think, if you've taken research, and I'm going to guess that most of you have taken research at some point, and you've ever looked at content analysis in research, you always need to have what they call the book, right? Which is the rules and the specifics of how you do the content analysis so that each analyzer, each reviewer has the same starting point and has the same definitions and looks at the content the same way. That's in order for the research to be valid. It's the same thing for social listening. With a protocol, you have consistent data. With consistent data, you can see patterns emerge, you can see anomalies, others can continue your work, or they can replicate your work. If you're reporting something that perhaps not anyone wants to see, it's important that they be able to reproduce it, right? And that where it's possible, if you have a protocol, you can automate your work. So when you're building your collection protocol, you want to define your sources. Are you using, which platforms are you going to use, right? Which platforms are you looking at? Certainly should be all of the platforms that are important to your brand. Are you using native analytics, which I would say probably always needs to be part of your protocol? Which third-party tools are you using? How many are you using? And how do they help you? The next part, number 2, setting your cadence, right, is probably the most important because you need to measure consistently. Now, I'm going to say that depending on the platform, you measure once a day, you measure 3 or 4 times a day. You might, for some platforms, although I think once a week is probably would only be if you didn't post a lot, right? You'd have to, can't think, I think in general you want to look at things a little bit more consistently than that. But of course, it also depends on the size of your staff and how much time you have. But the most important thing is that it's consistent. And then you need to standardize your metrics. Everybody needs to know what the metrics mean, how we get there, what numbers you're adding together, and it needs to be the same every single time. If you change them, all the data before that change is invalid. Or at least the data after it will not be valid with the data before the change. You need to document everything. We're doing an Excel spreadsheet for exactly that. If you're using screenshots, and if you're using AI, screenshots are really handy because AI can read screenshots. Make sure you make them the same way every time. You have the same amount of data. If you're doing all of the comments on one Instagram post, you need to do all of the comments on all the other Instagram posts. You need to have consistent naming conventions. This also is really important if you're using any sort of automation or AI assistance, because if you don't have the same naming conventions, then the program gets confused. That's even true for Google Analytics, and we'll go into that in the future. But when you are creating categories in Google Analytics, you need to create them exactly the same way every time, or it starts putting data in strange buckets. It doesn't collect all the data in one place, right? You also need to plan for what happens if you're sick. What happens if the internet goes down? What happens if a tool goes down, right? What happens if someone steps on the USB drive, right? You need to have a backup plan. You also need to have backups. You need to have a backup plan, and you need to have a way of indicating, that you missed this day, right? It's not the end of the world if you miss a day, just don't do it consistently. But also, you need to note that you missed that day so that it's part of your data record. Now, we have a listening tool stack from Module 3, right? We're using Social Blade for follower tracking, Talkwalker for social listening, FanPage Karma for engagement, and then we have an Excel dashboard for aggregation. We're also using Phalanx to do some engagement work because FanPage Karma is limited to 2 weeks, I think, and each email only gives you one brand. I suggest 2 emails for 2 brands, but you're still limited to 2 weeks. So at some point, you're probably going to want to pull out Phalanx. Think of AI as your analysis partner. AI is a tool that scales your ability to handle large data sets. It doesn't replace your strategic thinking, but what it does is it can process hundreds of comments and posts very quickly. It can do initial sentiment tagging for hundreds of comments and posts. It can then group content by theme. It can summarize long conversation threads, and it can spot patterns that you might miss in large data sets, because our minds don't do large data sets, but that's what AI does. Right? AI struggles with sarcasm, right? It doesn't understand industry jargon or insider references. It also doesn't really know which findings are the most important. I mean, you can tell it, and then it'll have a better idea, but it will weight all data equally unless you plan for that ahead of time in your prompts. It doesn't understand cultural context. It doesn't understand regional nuances. It doesn't understand why something might be insulting in one culture and not insulting in another culture. It is not good at connecting that data to business objectives. Taking the analysis again and connecting it to business objectives, you have to drive that connection, and it's the most important connection, right? Talkwalker does give you automated sentiment scores. AI can give you a deeper analysis of why sentiment is what it is, but you need to feed the data into it. Feeding the data into it is one of the things that is challenging. Third time's the charm. How do we get data into AI? The first is manual collection, right? You copy and paste the comments directly from the platform into whatever AI you're using. I myself tend to copy and paste them into a Word document and then import that Word document, just because for me it's just easier manually, just the way my brain works and the way my hands work. Right? You can export from tools such as Talkwalker and FanPage Karma. They export CSV files. You can take those CSV files and upload them into the AI of your choice. You can also screenshot comments, which sometimes is faster than copying and pasting them. If you screenshot all the screenshots you want, then you can upload those images into AI, and AI should be able to read the comments from your screenshots. always check this, right? Because sometimes it gives you wonky thoughts, or sometimes it's not reading it properly. But AI has the ability to read a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think it would be able to read, i.e. photographs and things like that. So there is, unfortunately, no free tool that lets you paste a URL and auto-scrape comments for AI analysis. I'm waiting for the day that they let us do that, but that day is not today. So how does your AI-assisted analysis workflow work? Step 1, you collect. From TalkWalker, that's export mentions and the sentiment data. For FanPage Karma, you can export the engagement metrics. From Social Blade, you can screenshot or note follower trends. You can do it manually by copying 20 to 50 representative comments from key posts, right? You can collect comments on the highest engagement posts, comments on posts that got unusual reactions, and any comments that mention specific product features or complaints. And then you can look at your competitors' comments for a comparison. You can also use screenshots, right, to do the same sort of thing. Now, document how you chose these things, because you're going to need to remember how they were chosen so that you do the same thing the next time you go to measure. Next, you get your AI to code for you. Sample prompt: I'm analyzing social media comments about my brand. Please categorize each comment by sentiment, positive, neutral, mixed, primary theme, product quality, customer service, price, any specific complaints or praise mentioned, and here are the comments. Boom, you give it the comments. AI coding helps because it will do a consistent categorization across hundreds of posts. It is faster than manual coding, and it can help you identify themes that you might not have noticed because, again, our brains don't do big data sets, but AI does. Step 3, you have to verify. Pull 20% of the AI-coded posts randomly and check to see if AI got it right. Right? Especially check posts that AI marked as neutral, because sometimes these are actually sarcastic or nuanced, and they have a true sentiment behind them. Now, and this is important too, because most of the posts you're going to get are going to be marked neutral, because that is often, there is no positive or negative sentiment expressed in a post. But you want to make sure you're getting as much of that actual sentiment as you possibly can. So AI misses sarcasm. I think we've said that. It misreads emoji context. It treats questions as neutral when they're complaints, and sometimes it's missing the industry-specific terminology that may show up in a post. Then, after AI has coded, ask it, based on this coded data, what patterns do you see? What themes appear most frequently? What's unexpected or unusual? What questions would you want to investigate further? I'm going to give you some sample prompts in just a second, but that's the kind of question you want to ask AI. This is where AI does the work. This is where using it is really important, because it finds patterns across large data sets that you'd miss, because our brains don't do large data sets. I'll say that probably 10 more times by the time we're done with this. Right? And then you need to interpret it. Right? If AI tells you 35% of negative comments mention shipping delays, you can say to yourself, this aligns with the supply chain issues we know the brand had in Q3. Recommendation: if they fix that issue, they need to communicate that. Well, you need to communicate that proactively. Right? AI gives you the what, you provide the so what. So here are some prompts that actually work, right? I'm going to pause here, sing a little song or something while you take a look at them. Keep in mind, you can come back here. I will give you a PDF of this presentation so you can actually copy these prompts if you want, right? I also believe that you want to, when you're using AI prompts, you want to add as much information as you have, right, that is useful. You want to be careful because your prompts need to be the same every single time, right? That's part of that, making sure that what you're doing is a valid analysis. So this might be the one place where you want to keep them reasonably short. You can always, the first time you use them, ask AI to analyze these prompts and give you suggestions if you've been using an agent or something where it has an idea of what you're doing. Data quality, know your limits. All social data has limitations. The analysis that you're doing in this class has a lot of limitations because we're only using free tools. That's what makes it fun though, right? Okay, the first is the obvious one, right? You're only seeing posts from people who post. The squeaky wheel gets the analysis. You have no idea what the people who don't post are thinking, right? Sentiment is not always accurate. Automated sentiment, AI, or the sentiment for an in-platform tool is wrong 20% of the time, right? Sarcasm is still a big problem. It's getting better. It used to be terrible, and now at least it's accurate enough that I feel confident talking about it, talking about the sentiment analysis that comes from a tool, but you need to check it. Free tools only show a fraction of the total conversations, right? Almost all free tools have very limited windows. Even enterprise tools, that's why they're so expensive. Twitter costs an amazing amount of money to get them to give you what they call the whole pipe, which is like every tweet ever that you can then analyze. And that's true of most social media platforms now. There's not a lot of free data lunches out there. If you're using a free or low cost tool, you're usually limited to a short time frame, right? They can only look back a week, maybe 30 days. If you're using a big enterprise tool like Meltwater or Sprout or I was going to say Radiant 6, but actually that's in Cision and that's in Salesforce. But anyhow, those often you can go back years, right? Very expensive tools, you have larger time boundaries. Before you analyze, you want to ask yourself these questions. Is your sample representative? Did you capture all the platforms where your audience is actually communicating with you? Is your time frame meaningful? Do you have normal activity? And do you have, if a crisis is happening, you need to measure maybe more often during the crisis, but you need to document it. Have you spot checked your data, right? That 20%? Can you explain the gaps, like if you missed data, right? And are you using the same coding book, right? Do you have the same metrics, the same timeframes, the same collection method for both of your brands? This, of course, is in context of your final project, but in context of your job, it's, across time, right? Are you using the same metrics across time, defined in the same way with the same collection method? Specifically for your project, right? You're building your protocol, you're collecting. You may even have collected last week, and that's fine. Maybe your collection will change a little bit, and then you need to take that into account. But you want to create your collection spreadsheet template, set your collection schedule, same day, same time, every week. Run your first AI-assisted analysis on the sample data set, and document your protocol so someone else can replicate it.